Welcome back to another episode of Defying Gentrification, and this is Kristen Jeffers, and I am really excited to read for you this week's newsletter. This week, I really wanted to tie a bow around our Black August series. Originally, when I conceived of the series, I had a whole different plan. If you go back and listen to those episodes, you'll know that there was a very different plan for this year's Black August. But to be honest, I just let myself be inspired. And so, of course, I want you to go back and listen to the episodes I did on Audre Lorde to understand why I needed to shift how I talked about myself and talked about my work. Then last week, I talked about the things I can and can't control and not worrying so much, but still being creative, but not losing my mind completely over the things that I cannot do in my built and lived environment. And then finally, this week, I'm actually going to conclude the series a little bit. Now, next week's newsletter, let me go ahead and make the announcements. They'll be at the tail end of the written newsletter, but I'll go ahead and announce my announcements here. I will be home in Greensboro. I will be supporting a colleague, Marianne LaGreco, in her finally having a book tour, one of those pandemic release books. Her book is called Everybody Eats, and it documented years of research and observation of our food systems and how we worked for food justice in Greensboro. So I'll be on a panel with several others who have been touch points in this work, and I'll be at Scuppernong Books on Sunday, August 30th from 4 to 6 for that event. It's free. You can just come to the bookstore. And yes, folks, we're trying to get the book tour started. Honestly, there's a lot that's still going on financially with me. I don't want to go into details because when I do, unfortunately, some folks just focus on the detail of me having financial trouble. But I will be going on book tour when we raise the funds. Anybody who would like to help me go on book tour, anybody who wants to have me come and bring the book or bring my own version of the Making New Fantasies workshop and journaling session in person, please do let me know. You can just email kjeffers2@gmail. That's my working email right now with everything that's gone on. I'm just taking it back simple. kjeffers2@gmail. That is inside of the show notes, and it's going to be inside of this episode's transcript. Another announcement is, yes, I'm so glad folks came to Making New Fantasies, and what I decided to do is now make third Thursdays a journaling session for us. That's what Thursday night ended up being. It was very interactive, and I really, really wanted that. I want more people to be inspired, like I'm inspired by June Jordan, and of course her inspiration from Buckminster Fuller and others to make new fantasies. And of course, make new fantasies alludes to how Audre Lorde said, if I don't make the new fantasies for myself, I'll be chewed up and spit out by other people. So I know I'm paraphrasing, but we know. If you read and listened to the last couple weeks of the podcast, you know what I'm talking about. So with that, y'all, let me do my usual plug for bookshop.org/shop/Kristen E. Jeffers. This is my shop that doesn't just sell the Defying Gentrification playbook. It sells other people's books. It is connected to the big bookstore apparatus. You order from it and you will get your book in only a few days. This is my preferred place for you to order the Defying Gentrification playbook. And I think you will find so much benefit from it, as you'll see. So let's get into today's post. I have called it June Jordan is Why I'm Unerasing Myself from the Urbanist Narrative. Now that, and the subtitle, at least on Substack, now that we've defined ourselves, we must continue to speak up and show up for the land and its earth. The image I've used here, and you'll see on the podcast link, is me holding the manuscript of the Defying Gentrification playbook almost a year ago today. I'm sitting on my deck. My new friend Wiggly is on my head. She comes in handy so much over these points when I have to just get up on the stage and everything else isn't necessarily ready in my life. And I cherish this moment because it's one of the final moments I have on our DC apartment terrace. We knew that we would be leaving. We knew we would have to leave at some point. And so we were there for that period of time, and I birthed my book. And then I have an image of June Jordan that's considered fair use by Wikipedia, where she's just kind of smiling somewhat mischievously at the camera. So I'm feeling that, and I'm in my picture, I'm looking down at my book with glee, and I have on a Museum Nerd t-shirt from the Frida exhibition that was at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond last year around that time. So that is what we led the image with. So now let's get into the written story. And of course, I'm going to jump in here and annotate some more because especially if you've read the written version, you know that this is photo heavy this week because I wanted to remind myself, along with others who may not know, I've been in these streets, at least these streets of design in the streets. I could have made this post a part 2 on Audre Lorde's influence on why I'm moving in this direction. After all, she was the one who said our silence wouldn't protect us. But in meditating on said silence and learning more about my Black queer feminist foreparents, I came across a New Yorker article from 2020 that detailed how June Jordan was a noted scholar of what she called environmental design, despite being lauded in most writings about her as just a poet. Subtitle, June Jordan, the OG Black queer feminist urbanist. Recently, the Black radical publication Hammer and Hope dug even deeper into the journey of her not publishing what they and she called a land reform novel called Okay Now. It was right on time for this Black August series. The New Yorker article details how she reached out to Buckminster Fuller, the designer of the architectural geodesic dome, of which the most prominent example is the blue golf ball-looking building at Epcot Center, among other housing and transportation and spiritual inventions. By the way, I didn't put this in the main draft, but according to Wikipedia, he moved away from even calling this stuff inventions, which was a pattern for him. He made up a lot of his own words. And researching this post, I was just really thrilled to see that because y'all know I love making up a word. Back to the text. She spent several months studying architects on the weekends at a Manhattan library, and then she took a trip to Greece, despite struggling to make ends meet and living in a Queens housing project. Her husband left her and her toddler during this time, and she sent her toddler to his parents because of her poverty. However, she did have the ear of folks like Fuller and writers at publications such as Esquire and the New York Times. But when writing about a joint conceived project with Fuller for quote-unquote urban renewal in Harlem for Esquire, she omitted her role in it in print. Then the editors at Esquire turned around and turned the article into the case for getting rid of the Black folks that Jordan had reached out to Fuller to create the project for. In the Hammer and Hope article, it mentions that she visited Mississippi for the New York Times and had become a housing researcher, espousing many of Jane Jacobs' tenets of housing and street design, helping people be better humans at the same time as Jacobs. So yes, June Jordan and Jane Jacobs were contemporaries along with Buckminster Fuller. So we're in that era of the 60s and that design movement. However, Jacobs was able to get her nonfiction Urbanist manifesto published, multiple to be exact, even though she was not without criticisms of her own just for being a woman. While Jordan was questioned by her publishers at Knopf for her own Urbanist nonfiction draft, which diverged from Jacobs' reasoning on what was needed for a better relationship between humans and the earth. Jordan asserted, based on her Mississippi trip, that Black Southerners held the keys for land reform on their farms and in their towns and cities. Jordan tried to pivot her manifesto into a novel, Okay Now, that was never completed in her lifetime, and she was working on up to her death. Fuller at least wrote her a letter of recommendation for a fellowship in Italy that allowed her to start on Okay Now. Other reporters and museum retrospectives continue to allow Jordan to be erased from their Harlem project, which was never built. Another note that I didn't include on erasure in the main draft, when you go on the Wikipedia page for Buckminster Fuller, there's a section of people that he's influenced and that he's been a part of their journey. June Jordan is also missing from that Wikipedia page. If somebody can get ahead of me and put that edit in based on this information, please do. And then back to the text. She still, despite all this erasure, continued to write poetry and speak up for folks in Palestine and the U.S. South. So let's now get to this next section about what all this has to do with me, how I'm changing this narrative of no Black woman armchair urbanist. So, Jane Jacobs is considered an expert on urbanism despite only having some college credits from Columbia University and technically Barnard College, being married to an architect, and writing commentaries, articles, and books. She did not get to the point where she held her degree, and neither did June Jordan. They both self-studied or took classes that enhanced their writings, but that did not result in a full degree. And a lot of that was because Barnard College and Columbia, we know they're kind of special, not special in a good way now. They really were doubling down on the racism and the sexism back in the 60s. So I feel like both of these women should be holding degrees. I also found out in my research on Buckminster Fuller that he was suspended from Harvard twice. Somehow he still managed to get respect after doing all of his inventions and get professorships. He was able to granted honorary, awards and such. So, I take this back to this current moment. I sit with a degree, a master in public affairs with a concentration in community and economic design. Not only do I have a bachelor in communication, I have a master's in a version of this field, such that just something enough for me to be able to self-study and think on these things, and really reflecting on these three individuals and how they didn't necessarily have completed education, but back in the day, their aptitude, their access to people who opened doors for them were able to get to where they needed to go. And then I also took a moment to reflect in the big piece about being a Southerner and how being a Southerner, we tend to have more conversations. In many cases, people will criticize us for, seeming to be fake, when it seems like we can resolve things quickly. Sometimes, other times, it seems like guns and knives are involved. That many of us can find a way to have dinner every holiday, some of us, and still be in disagreement of life choices. And of course, I wanted to highlight how for a lot of us Black folks, Jim Crow required us to all live together. Some of us may have been wealthy. And yes, there was wealth in the Black South after enslavement and up through Jim Crow. In fact, that's part of why Jim Crow existed, because of jealousy of said wealth. But now, of course, in my migrations, that's part of what I'm sorting through. I'm going to save all these thoughts around my Southern migrations that I didn't express in this week's podcast, or at least this week's newsletter. I'm going to save those for my series that's coming up, because, it's 10 years since I left the South, or at least North Carolina. So I got a lot to say and think about that, hitting this milestone decade. And then June Jordan noted that she picked up on this vibe that we have, this vibe of how we seem to resolve things, seem to be constantly in pursuit, no matter our class level of liberation and justice, yet we live in a racialized apartheid, especially in Mississippi. And as we know, Mississippi continues to be one of the last states to get everything. Yet I've seen and I've witnessed a resolve in those folks to keep going, or as we say in the South, keep on keeping on. So then I decided, y'all, I needed to remind everybody how much I've done, including reminding my inner child and my inner teenager and my adult self that's really been through it these last few years. So there are about 20 images of me doing various things with various people, all related to like my writings, my speeches, my book, times with friends and family that really reminded me about said books. Everything is not there. I would have probably put an image of my first book in. I just kind of went down my favorite section of my Apple phone. So there's moments, and then some of you have images and moments of me like on stage reading things, speaking to you. And I'd love to see them. Definitely, if you want to email those to kjeffers2@gmail.com, I would love to see images of me, positive images of me doing the things that I love the most. And even though at this moment, I still need to finalize some things legally around the copyright on the Defying Gentrification Playbook, I still own this podcast and I own this newsletter. And I myself am going to be writing a trilogy, my own land reform political romance thriller trilogy. That's all I'm going to give y'all right now. But just know that this has been years in the making. It's been going on in the background. And you think I go there with these newsletters, y'all really about to see something when I put some of this stuff into a fictionalized narrative, an auto-fiction, if you will, of my life and things that, if they had happened like this, would have been very, very extraordinary. Speaking of the current book, as I mentioned before at the top of the episode, we will take it on tour. And I want to also thank all of you all who serve as my Buckminster Fullers in my life. Those of you all who insist on telling your white friends and family, your other communities, who are bent on white supremacy, all of y'all who push against white supremacy on the regular inside our industry or inside these schools of thought and outside just regular old dinner table conversations. I appreciate all of y'all for pushing against homophobia, fat phobia, transphobia, ableism, economic classism, all these things that you push against, all these doors you've opened, all these gates you've unlocked. Don't know that even though I have my moments where I'm critical and I'm calling out the folks who don't see me, I see y'all so much. And that I wanted to spend this year. That's why I took some time off of writing earlier in the year, where I went to my private journals, because I really wanted to end this year, this 40th year of my life, making sure that the people that love me know that I know you love me. And that, of course, includes my wife. So I will not let myself be erased, y'all. That is the one thing I have to say today. Let me say it again. I will not let myself be erased. I will not be shrinking. I will be opening my own gates, and I will be pressing past any criticism. Now looking back at some of these ancestors, both white and black, men and women of all types, when you're doing something right and you're doing something unique, oftentimes, you got the haters, you got the people who just can't hang with what's going on, but we're pressing on. And so I want to leave y'all this podcast week with that. And then one final reminder, come to Greensboro and see me on August 30th from 4 to 6. Also, come and join our third Thursday journaling workshops. The link is inside of the newsletters. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to y'all soon.